Good day. This is Bart Starr. Welcome to our webinar series. Today, we're going to get you to the cloud. We're going to float you to the cloud with Oracle Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Service, often kindly referred to as PCMCS. Today's presenters, myself, I come to you with 28 years of experience with EPM. I've sat in your shoes way back in my career, doing EPM, hands-on work, making those models hum, and then I became part of Oracle, and my long storied history at Oracle includes stops beyond financial services into competitive products, actually, against the Oracle Hyperion product line, and so I've built similar type products. And most recently with the product development team for 5 years with HPCM and PCMCS. So I just joined Renzel here at the beginning of this calendar year to continue our strength in this space and look forward to bringing you lots of intellectual property. Intellectual property really is about bringing our depth of knowledge, both in technology, subject matter domains like costing and profitability, and also our industry expertise, our experience, and putting a purpose on all of that to deliver packages of advisory services, technical accelerators, and we will be delivering some domain starter kits. And we'll get to a couple examples of those as we move through the presentation. But you're going to most likely hear a whole lot of great stuff from someone who's been making HPCM and PCMCS work every day of the week. Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew Lefurda. I'm a project lead consultant at Renzel, and I've been working in the EPM environment for past 7 years or so. I've actually worked on HPCM specifically since 2009, so I've been working on HPCM right from pretty much the beginning of HPCM when it started all those years ago. Of course, like all EPM consultants these days, it's not just HPCM that I work on. HPCM is definitely the focus area and definitely my passion, but I've worked in a number of other regulatory and activity-based costing solutions. I've also focused on business intelligence, enterprise planning and budgeting, some Hyperion performance scorecard, and of course S-Base. I have worked in a multitude of industries as well, be it financial services, investments and insurance, governments and parastatal, logistics, transportation, and of course any of the things in terms of utilities, communication, healthcare, and manufacturing as well. And what I'm going to be showing you today is really taking you through kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to be doing. And as Bart said, HPCM is one of these products that I work with every day, and as I said, it's one of the products that I really do enjoy working with. And I'm going to show you and try and portray some of that knowledge that I've learned over those many years working with HPCM on how we can move your standard profitability model into the cloud.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's look quickly at sort of Renzel by the numbers. We have again a good history here, 20 plus. We are an Oracle Platinum consulting partner across their technology platforms for EPM, BI, and big data. The methodologies and implementation approach that we've applied have garnered us thousands of customers and multi-thousands of projects here. And as Andrew pointed out, lots of penetration into different industries. So if you're sitting out there, saying, oh, how does this apply to me? We have someone that can, tell you how it's done for your industry. Obviously, today is focused on the subject matter of profitability and cost management, and really about going from on-premise to the cloud quickly, getting you there in a very predictable fashion. And so, we've got not only tons of clients in HPCM, As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I came aboard is the depth of implementations of HPCM. But also, we're very much on the inner circle on the PCMCS train. And Andrew, if you can go to the next slide, we'll sort of explain some of that genealogy and lineage, as we like to say in the cost management world, around our depth of solution history here. We go all the way back, as Andrew said, to our inception, back to the base technologies. We're creating profitability solutions in S-Base, and you can just glance there. Well, there's a lot of firsts. First for moving to HPCM off of Hyperion business modeling. First live implementation of a management ledger, and most recently around that domain starter kit. We are co-developing solutions like domain starter kits with Oracle. First one being IT service costing. And as you will see, we're going to be announcing today a PCMCS accelerator along with an assessment launch to get you off of the ground and into the cloud even quicker. Andrew.
Great, thanks very much.
This is a webinar where our webinar series share a lot of knowledge and a lot of know-how, and we're all in. We're all in around PCMCS. We have a lot of upcoming webinars, a lot of knowledge to share, a lot of thought leadership. So when you take this this presentation back to your organization, we've put in a lot of links here on how to get to that, but just suffice it to say that over the next several weeks and months, we're going to be talking about purposes for PCMCS around manufacturing, around healthcare, specifically around the payer and provider space, manufacturing, and as I alluded to before, IT costing. As well, we have, you can always catch us on social media. So please go out to your favorite LinkedIn, Twitter, where you can find us, or contact us, and we'll tell you how to just get pushed all of our great events and knowledge coming out of Renzel. With that, let's just really quickly get Andrew in the saddle. What I've always liked about profitability management from a subject matter standpoint is it does sit in the center of both your financial accounting process as well as your strategic and performance management accounting. So whether that's on premises, historically with the Hyperion product line, or as Oracle goes to the cloud, we've got ways to provide solutions for you that are relevant not only within the EPM domain but across the enterprise, and again very specific to your industry. So we're putting sort of the name to the face during our process. One last build there, Andrew. Yes, as a push to the cloud, everything's cloud. So we've got our hands in both, and if you have a hybrid approach, we're here for you too. We know how to traverse this technology landscape, both of on-premises and on the cloud. Andrew.
Great, thank you very much. Great, so everyone, we're here today to obviously discuss floating to the cloud. And part of floating to the cloud is going to be taking your standard profitability model, converting it to management ledger, and then pushing it up to PCMCS. So before we get into a lot of the details of how to do that, it's very useful for us just to lay some kind of groundwork. So we know that profitability and cost management has been around for a long time, at least in one form or another within Oracle. It started way back in 1992 where Renzel, and as we saw on the slide earlier, started developing custom S-Base profitability and cost solutions. In 2001, that evolved and moved on to having planning custom solutions. Then in 2008, Oracle decided, well, let's release a product suite that is specifically tailored towards profitability and cost management. And they introduced Standard Profitability. And Standard Profitability was, and it still is, a great product, but it had specific ways that were sort of, let's say, shortcomings. So in 2012 they released Detailed Profitability, and again in 2015 they released Management Ledger. And each of these three products, being Standard Profitability, Detailed Profitability, and Management Ledger, built on each other and formed a specific niche within the profitability and cost environment. And finally, we get to the stage that we are today, which is profitability and cost management. And profitability and cost management, as you see as we go through these slides, is really the complete allocation solution. It's a fantastic tool for profitability and cost management, and it really does have everything that we need in order to do really kind of value or add value to your profitability and cost analysis. So, as I mentioned before, we've got three different modules within HPCM when we talk about on-premise HPCM. And there are differences between the three of them. So as I mentioned before, we started out with Standard Profitability. And Standard Profitability is really, really fantastic when we need to do things like detailed traceability and really kind of detailed genealogy. It's also very good with handling advanced costing methodologies that are ABC, for example, ABC, activity-based costing, or more kind of costing models that are more rigid in their approach. But as I mentioned as well, Standard Profitability does have some specific drawbacks. And we'll go into them in a lot more detail, but two of the most obvious ones that we see at clients is that Standard Profitability doesn't handle dimensional change very well. If you're getting new cost centers or new accounts in at a very, very rapid rate, Standard Profitability doesn't really handle that too well, unless, of course, we've built in very, very complex automation. And another thing that it really doesn't do so well in terms of, it's just your dimensional member changes, just as I mentioned, your dimensional change in terms of if I want to add a new dimension, say, Standard Profitability is very rigid, it doesn't do very well with those kind of changes. Now, to handle some of the drawbacks of Standard Profitability in terms of the volume that it can handle, Standard Profitability doesn't handle volume very well, and Detailed Profitability was introduced to get around that drawback. And Detailed Profitability is kind of like the heavy lift of the three. Kind of just to throw the kitchen sink in it, it's going to take and it's going to allocate millions and millions and millions of allocations, but it's not going to do very complex allocations. So it's only got a two-step model, and it's got up to 5 dimensions in your first step, up to 25 dimensions in your second stage, and it's very, very, very good at handling large volumes. And what we see a lot of the time is that those two, Standard Profitability and Detailed Profitability, work quite closely together. And of course, when we talked about 2015 and we saw the introduction of Management Ledger, Management Ledger was really the first time that we could say to clients, great, we can really take anything you throw at us and we can give you the amount of flexibility that you require for your costing without actually having to really think about having to fit into, for example, a stage approach. So Management Ledger handles dimensional change extremely well. It's extremely easy to use, and it has a very, very fast turnaround in terms of loading your data and seeing your data calculated. It also handles complexity very well. We know that through our experience that almost everything that you can do in Standard Profitability, we can convert to a Management Ledger application. There are very, very few examples where you have a Standard Profitability application that you can't convert to Management Ledger. Management Ledger, of course, is also good with waterfall modeling, but also another key advantage is iterative calculations. So Standard Profitability can't do iterative calculations. So if that was a drawback that you had currently in your Standard Profitability, Management Ledger now can handle that. And if we talk about what I just went through in a bit more of a kind of graphic way, this is what it would look like. So you can see that blue line for us is Standard Profitability, and you can see that it handles model complexity very well. It also is end-user focused. The ease of maintenance with Standard Profitability, as we'll go through, is not so fantastic when compared to the others. Of course, this is a relative graph. But the reporting analysis is very good in terms that you can create very, very detailed reports. But the big drawback of, or one of the biggest drawbacks of Standard Profitability is, of course, your data handling. Just can't handle big dimensions or a lot of dimensions very well. And that's where your Detailed Profitability comes through. Detailed Profitability handles data volume extremely well, handles a lot of dimensions, and it can do a lot of allocations. But it's not very good with complexity. Again, the end-user focus relative to the other profitability models is lower, but it does have a place within the overall product suite. Now, Management Ledger really takes the advantages of detailed profitability and standard profitability and combines the two of them. It can handle volume well. It can handle a lot of, because it's based on ASO, it can handle a lot of volume very well. And of course, it's incredibly end-user focused. We'll see as we go through, updating and maintaining a Management Ledger application is incredibly easy. Of course, your ease of maintenance is, your end-user focus because of that ease of maintenance is very, very good as well. And to further that, PCMCS is now based on Management Ledger, but it takes it even further. We have some key advantages of PCMCS. Of course, it is cloud-based, and it does come with all those advantages of the cloud, but we also get key advantages in terms of bundled data management and bundled reporting. And we're going to go through a lot of those advantages and a lot of those things today. But if we looked at it, as I mentioned earlier, PCMCS is really the complete allocation solution for us. Of course, it's cloud-based and no large initial investment. It's always accessible, so wherever you go, if you've got an interconnection, you can access it. Of course, it's always up to date. There's no waiting for your IT to update your current version. And of course, there's limited IT involvement. And as I mentioned before, when we look at it, like all the allocation models, you have an allocation engine, you have rule transparency, but in terms of PCMCS specifically, you also have embedded intelligence, and you have dashboards and work areas, and you have more advanced built-in data integrations. So those advantages are fantastic. I'm not going to go too much into the advantages of PCM specifically, and what I really would encourage you to do is if you feel that there is something specifically on the PCMCS side and the individual steps of managing an PCMCS model. I did a webinar towards the end of last year, and I really would encourage that anyone who wants to find out more about PCMCS specifically and delve into some of the more details around it that I'm not going to cover today, go onto the Renzell website and have a look at that webinar. It will cover almost all of those questions that you have. So we've done your introduction to PCMCS. We know where it fits in our product suite and within the HPCM modules as well. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. What is in it for you? Why should you move to the cloud? Well, as I mentioned, before we move to the cloud, we really want to move you into Management Ledger. So a lot of this webinar is going to focus on greatly how do we take a legacy standard model and move it into Management Ledger first, and then move it into the cloud. And Management Ledger has a lot of advantages over standard profitability. One of the biggest ones for us, and that I've alluded to already, is that your maintenance is so much simpler. And part of that reason why it's so much simpler is because you don't have a reliance on back-end staging tables. Standard profitability, I always like to refer to standard profitability working from the ground up, meaning that every level 0 intersection you have within standard profitability has to have an allocation path for it to be allocated correctly. Now that's fantastic in terms of the detail that you get, but it's a problem because if I add a new account or a new cost center or a combination of any other of my dimensions, I've got to add an allocation path for that. Now in standard profitability, a lot of the time we handle that with our back-end staging tables. But those back-end staging tables can take a bit of work to get right and to get through, so we have a lot of automation that comes with those. And of course, that automation is often built in BAT files and SQL coding, so there's some IT involvement. Now Management Ledger doesn't have the concept of stages, and as such it doesn't have staging tables anymore. We'll go into why that is such a big advantage for us, but essentially it means that our maintenance is so much easier because of course, excuse me, we don't have any staging tables. Management Ledger is also ASO only. So standard profitability used the combination of ASO, S-based applications, and ASO applications, S-based applications, in order to produce its results. Now Management Ledger only has an ASO cube. And part of the benefit of that is that ASO cubes are designed to handle far bigger dimensions and far more of them. So we get around 2 big restrictions for standard profitability in that way. We don't have metadata restrictions. So we'll get into it a little bit later, but because we don't have the concept of stages in Management Ledger, we don't duplicate dimensions. So it's a big advantage for us. We don't hit the restrictions that we have in terms of the number of blocks that we do in your PSO cubes. Now what that means in a very real world situation is that we can add more dimensions. We're not restricted if we're hitting a block size because we only have, for example, 3 stages and we're duplicating dimensions within those 3 stages. We can't add more dimensions even if we wanted to sometimes. And with ASO, with S-Space ASO cubes, it allows us to have greater flexibility in terms of the dimensionalities which we can add, and of course that means that we can have better reporting. Now along with that, we have freedom to allocate whatever way you want to in Management Ledger. You're not restricted to have up to 9 stages or 3 dimensions per stage. Management Ledger, if you want to have 5 dimensions as your source, you have 5 dimensions as your source. If you want to have 10 cost objects or 10 dimensions as your cost objects, you can do that as well. It's completely free to allocate the way that you want to. And for a lot of our clients, that kind of is a huge change in the way that you think about things because you're no longer restricted. We can really go to our clients with Management Ledger and say, what is the best way for you to do this? You don't have those restrictions anymore. So it really allows, from a client point of view, to allocate the way that you want to. And of course, you can adapt and you can change your methodology incredibly quickly in Management Ledger, which is also an incredible advantage. And finally, in Management Ledger, you have simplified reporting. Most of our clients, when we have done these standard profitability implementations, we have to, most of the time, have an additional reporting application. And the reason for that is it really comes out of the fact that standard profitability duplicates our dimensions if they're involved in more than one stage. That, of course, is not ideal for a number of reasons. Of course, it's not ideal because our end users have to use unique names when they do their smart view reports, for example. But it's just not ideal. So what we tend to do is we have that reporting application, but that additional reporting application comes with additional maintenance as well and additional automation as well. Management Ledger, most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time we don't need that reporting application because you don't duplicate the dimensions, and also it's an ASO cube already. So it's fantastic for us because it allows us to simplify your environment and simplify your overall reporting. Now, we've looked at Management Ledger, but what are the advantages of PCMCS? Because we know that PCMCS builds upon Management Ledger, but PCMCS adds even more benefits to you than just PCMCS adds more benefits to you than just Management Ledger does. And there's a really kind of 4 ones that we've identified. And the first one is your enhanced data management. PCMCS comes bundled with data management, and what that allows you to do is have some kind of mappings to your source systems or from flat files from your source systems. And that's a huge advantage for us because, again, it allows us to do things in a way that we might not have done if your current on-premise environment doesn't have a mapping tool such as FTME. But for example, in PCMCS, we can get a file out of your GL and we can map or do almost like a cost pooling exercise before we actually bring it into PCMCS. Now that's fantastic for us because it allows us to simplify our PCMCS approach, but it also gives you the detail in being able to drill back to see the underlying detail to your source data. So a huge advantage for us. It's also very, very easy for users to load data. PCMCS, of course, has even enhanced reporting. So again, if you have a look at that presentation we did towards the end of last year, we focused heavily on the reporting side, and there's a great reason for that. PCMCS is a fantastic reporting tool. You have built-in standard reports and built-in intelligent visualizations, and it really does reduce your need for an additional BI tool, which of course reduces your need for an additional reporting department if you have one. And that's a great advantage for us. We can develop reports incredibly quickly in PCMCS, and we can get the data to people who need it in the form that they need it, and of course when they need it as well. PCMCS does have simplified reporting, but because you've got that enhanced reporting layer, it's even simpler, would you believe it, than Management Ledger. We do have, of course, access to Smart View. We have access to financial reports in PCMCS, but it's just that level of just ease of creating reports in PCMCS, which is fantastic. And of course, you have the benefit of the cloud. We know that if you've watched any of the other Renzel webcasts on various other cloud services, you know that the cloud for Oracle is pushing it hard, but there are specific and huge advantages to that. And three of my favorite ones is obviously minimal IT involvement. If you're doing things on premise, there's obviously an IT cost associated with that. Of course, accessibility is a big one as well. If you've got an internet connection, as I said earlier, you can access PCMCS. So if you're on a plane and you've got an internet connection, you can access PCMCS. It's all secure, of course, as well. And another big advantage to us is always up to date. We know that a lot of our clients, the reason why they might still be on standard profitability is because they can't upgrade their system to 11.124. And that may be for various reasons. It may be that, for example, they've got other applications in their environment, for example, HFM or planning, that they can't upgrade. And that's a huge drawback to us because, as we saw earlier, profitability and cost management has evolved through the years. And to keep up with that evolution, you need to have your environment up to date. Now, you don't have to worry about that in the cloud because it's there for you. So hopefully at this point, I've gotten you excited about the benefits of PCMCS and, of course, Management Ledger as well. But we know that within all organizations, it's not that easy to change. And sometimes you really do need to say, when is the best time for me to move to Management Ledger or move to PCMCS? And what we found at a lot of our clients is that what I'm going to show you now is some of the, let's say, considerations for migration. If you have one or multitude of these criteria, it really is an opportunity to think about moving to Management Ledger and even to the cloud. And the biggest one and the easiest one that we see is a pending reorganizations. Of course, companies do reorgs all the time, but if you do a major reorganization that is going to impact your standard profitability model, it really might be an opportunity to say, great, well, we know that we're going to have to change that standard profitability model in a fundamental way. Why don't we do it in Management Ledger? We know that all the advantages that I've just shown you, you're excited about them, but let's take advantage of them now. Let's really see the opportunity to take hold of them, because you have to redo or you have to work on that standard profitability model anyway. Of course, if you've got an upcoming allocation process change that you need to do, it's also a great opportunity. So for example, if you want to report on a new dimension, so let's say we want to bring customers into our profitability analysis, it's a fantastic opportunity to move to the cloud or to move to Management Ledger. Of course, if you want to have greater flexibility and you want less reliance on IT, it's a fantastic opportunity to move to the cloud. If you're changing your allocations very often, or if you get in a huge amount of dimensional change very often, it's a fantastic opportunity to move to the cloud to reduce your reliance on IT. And of course, you know, what if happens if you want to do additional what-if analysis? We know that we live in a very turbulent times. What-if analysis is becoming more and more important to us. And of course, we want to do what-if analysis on a whole range of different scenarios and different kind of situations that happen in the future. And Management Ledger, of course, all the HPCM modules are very good with what-if analysis, but Management Ledger and PCMCS are even stronger than the other two as well. So if you want to do enhanced what-if and ad hoc analysis, it's time to move to the cloud. And then, of course, if you're hitting your profitability dimensionality limits. So like I said, if you really wanted to, or you have wanted to for a while, to add another reporting dimension such as customer or product, and you just haven't got it in your model because of those limitations, it really is the time to think about moving to Management Ledger or to the cloud to really take advantage of profitability and cost analysis in a way that really adds value to your business. Of course, if you want to simplify your model maintenance, like we talked about earlier, it's time to move to Management Ledger. Management Ledger, as we'll see a little later, Management Ledger is so much easier to maintain because we don't have the staging tables, and by association because we don't have to do level 0 allocation parts. It's incredibly easy to use, it's incredibly easy to update, and it really is a point-and-click system. And I'll go into that and I'll explain that in a little more with detail. Of course, if you've already got other Management Ledger models, it might be time to convert your legacy standard profitability models into Management Ledger as well. And the reason for that is really just up to the company itself, but often we want to have one type of model application type if we can. It's simpler, it's easier to train your employees, and of course, it really is easier to report when you just have one kind of way of reporting as well. And finally, and the one that we hope is going to take the most hold is that companies start moving towards a cloud-based strategy. So we know that a huge amount of clients are really trying very hard to reduce their IT costs, and part of that is obviously moving to the cloud and taking advantage of the cloud-based products such as PCMCS. And to really, as I mentioned a little earlier, if you need to move to PCMCS, one of the first tasks that we're going to do is convert your standard profitability into Management Ledger. So hopefully I've really got you excited about it, and what I'm going to show you now is actually how to do this, how to actually go from ground to cloud. And you can see the diagram that we have here. For those who are Renzal clients, this diagram will seem quite familiar to us. And the reason is it really is quite familiar, and it's an approach that we're very comfortable with. It's an approach that we've done a lot, and it's an approach that has really worked in a very real-world examples. So the first thing that we want to do, if we break it up into 6 steps of going ground to cloud, the first thing that we want to do is create our benchmarks. So to create a realistic benchmark between your standard profitability model and your management ledger model, we want to migrate your current standard profitability to the environment that you're going to be working on to create your management ledger application. Simple enough. I'm not going to really go into that into any more detail. Of course, you can use any of the multitude of ways you might do that migration. Once it's on that environment that we're going to create management ledger on, we obviously want to run a single POV. So calculate a single POV. And the reason for that is that we want to get an idea of how fast your standard profitability model runs so that we can compare it to management ledger at the end of the day. Our next step for us is our master data and data integration management. Of course, we have to create a master S-based application. And a lot of what I'm going to be taking you through today is based off of Profitability Manager. So we know that there are various ways to create applications, HPCM applications. I'm going to take you through the Profitability Manager. And of course, the first step of creating models in that kind of way is to create a master S-based application. So we're going to create a master S-based application. We're going to copy over our relevant standard profitability model of standard profitability outline into that newly created S-based master application. We're going to do some changes to the outline to make sure that it's now relevant for management ledger instead of standard profitability. And then, of course, we're going to deploy our application and the associated database. And finally, we're going to load our data. Our next step is to do some model development. And there's really 3 easy steps in here. You're going to document your rule sets and your rules. We want to really know what we want to create before we start creating it. Streamlines the process, and of course, it makes sure that everyone knows what the end result should be. We're going to create a single POV, and we're going to create any of the rule sets or rules that we need. Next, we're going to execute our model. We're going to calculate our newly created management ledger application. Before you actually hit the calculate button, you want to run some validations. And of course, after you hit the calculation button, you also want to run some validations. And once that model is calculated and it's ready to go, or it has calculated already successfully, you want to look at those reports. You want to create some balancing reports to make sure that your output from management ledger is consistent with your output from standard profitability. We don't want a situation where your output is different. We know that there's going to be some differences in the way that you report, and specifically sometimes at the intersections that you look at, but we don't want the actual data to change in this example. And that's key for us. And of course, we're also going to make sure we're going to do some comparisons in terms of how long does standard profitability take, how long did management ledger take, and we want to see what the differences is. And finally, once you've done that, you now have a functioning management ledger application. And once you've got that management ledger application, taking it to PCMCS or floating into the cloud is incredibly easy. We just do an export template, we're going to import the template into the cloud, and then of course we can focus on some of the more cloud-specific activities, such for example in doing this data management that I explained earlier. Of course, you're going to execute any of the calculations that you have. You're going to create some fancy dashboards and some awesome reports, and then you can also define security as well. So let's go into the specifics. Let's actually show you how to do this, or how you should go about and how you can really start thinking about migrating your model. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new S-based master application. So in my example, you can see on the left-hand side is my standard profitability model. So I've called it PCM SDDS. and the little s is for stage. On the right-hand side, I copied the master application into a newly created management ledger application, or management ledger master application, called PCM MNT small s. And there were some changes that I needed to do before I could actually go ahead and deploy my application. So we spoke about it a little bit earlier, that the first change that I want to do is change my no member to specific no member in a dimension. So standard profitability has certain requirements in terms of your dimensions. And one of those requirements is that we have to have 2 generation 2 members, and the one has to be no member. Now that sounds great, and it is great a lot of the time, but the problem with that is that it creates duplicate members in our outline. So as I mentioned before, standard profitability you don't have to create duplicate members. Management ledger, doesn't have to create duplicate members, and we don't really want duplicate members if we can avoid it. So the first thing that we're going to do is go through all of our business dimensions and change the no members to no member and then the dimension name. So you can see on the green there for under accounts, I've put now my no member has changed from no member to no account. Likewise, I've changed from no member and my all profit centers to no profit center. My legal entity dimension has changed from no member to no legal entity, and so on. We want to do that for every single one of our business dimensions. So once we've done that, our next step is to think about our drivers. So a big change for us in terms of the difference between standard profitability and management ledger is that we no longer have a measures or allocation type dimension. They're replaced by the rule and balance dimension. But because that measures dimension is falling away or has fallen away, we need somewhere to set our drivers. We know that in standard profitability models, your drivers sit under your user-defined drivers in your measure dimension. Now in profitability in management ledger applications, there's 2 kind of logical places to sit your drivers. The first one is under accounts. So we know that a lot of clients, and specifically, for example, if you have planning applications, a lot of the drivers tend to sit under the accounts dimension. And there's nothing wrong with that, and we can definitely put those drivers in the accounts dimension. However, I'm a big fan of creating a new dimension called data type and placing those drivers in that data type dimension. And the reason for that is, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons for me is it creates an easy place to select those drivers, but it also means that I can put other data type related members in that data type dimension, which of course enhances my flexibility. It also can ensure that I have more powerful reporting. Then the last thing that we need to do is of course create our new rule and balance type dimensions. So very, very simple for us. They're really, the rule and balance type dimension in management ledger really kind of form the same focus as the allocation type and measures would in a standard profitability model. So we don't have to create any members in them. We just really need to create the rule and balance type dimensions. And then of course we want to remove your allocation type and your measures dimension. So easy enough, and that is really the 3 basic things that we have to do when we create or when we convert a standard profitability master application into a management ledger application. Sounds easy, and it generally is easy. Of course, we can add more dimensions if we need to. So I spoke a little earlier. So say I wanted to enhance my reporting by adding customer or adding product, for example. I can do that at this stage. Likewise, I can add any attribute dimensions and any UDAs that will enhance my model as well at this stage. But once I'm happy with that dimension, and of course I've tagged the appropriate dimensions with the appropriate UDAs, I can go ahead and actually create my application. Now in Profitability Manager, creating your applications is incredibly easy. We know that in Standard Profitability, if you've created them in your Profitability Manager, you're going to do the same way. The only real difference is that you're going to select Management Ledger as your application type, and you're going to make sure that your dimension source is Master Cube. And we're going to select all the dimensions from the newly created master applications, and we're going to deploy it. Now once that application is deployed, we can actually start looking at So once that's deployed, we're actually going to start talking about our app. We're actually going to deploy our database, or our S-Base database itself. And now this is a lot easier for us. And for those who are used to standard profitability, I'm sure that you're screaming at me, telling me, wait, we need to define our stages before we can deploy our application. And that is true before we can deploy our SPS application. And that is true in standard profitability. But because we don't have stages in Management Ledger, we can actually deploy as straight away or as soon as we've actually deployed our application, which is really, really good for us. Of course, we also only have one database to deploy, and that's your ASO application. So we can go in, we can click on Manage Database, and we can deploy our application. And once that's deployed, we're going to see some key differences again between standard profitability and Management Ledger. And part of that, the biggest changes that we see in the models is, of course, the duplication of stages. So I know in standard profitability, you can see there on my screen in that I have duplications for my profit center. So I've used profit center in 3 stages, and I've used legal entity in 4 stages. So I've duplicated those dimensions. Now, of course, all the members in those dimensions are also duplicated. So that creates a number of problems. Of course, it means that we're going to hit our block size a lot sooner than we would like. But it also means that we have a whole lot of duplicate member names, which is not always ideal for us. Now, in Management Ledger, you can see there, it's far cleaner. It's far easier for me to navigate through my dimensions because I don't have duplicate dimensions. And that has a huge advantage in terms of not only simplifying the reporting that users don't have to select unique names, but it also has the advantage that now you can see I've added product and client to my outline, and it deploys successfully without any issues whatsoever. So that's fantastic for us, and it really, really is a big advantage for us. Okay, so where are we at now? We have created an application. We've created an SPS master application. We've deployed that application. We've deployed the SPS application. Now it's time to load that data in. And what we really want to make sure is that we want to start with a single POV. So we don't want to calculate multiple POVs when we do this exercise. We really want to make sure that we have one POV that is correct, and we want to go from there. So how we get that data into Management Ledger is going to be really up to whatever way makes sense to us. Now, sometimes we'll use SmartView to load in your source, financial, and driver data. Other times we'll use a free loading form and load it through EAS. Other times we'll use structural loading, and in some specific and very unique situations, we use FDME as well. But what we really want to make sure when we do this is that we load the same data that we loaded into standard profitability. We want to make sure that our starting point is exactly the same. And exactly the same to standard profitability, when you load data into a Management Ledger SPS application, you have to have at least one dimension from every one of you, at least one member from every one of your dimensions. So in my specific example that we're going to go through, I know that my source dimensions are my account, profit center, and legal entity. Everything else, instead of selecting no member like I would in standard profitability, I'm going to select no client, no product, no region, source data, which is my data type, and no rule and no input for my balance type, my balance and my rule dimensions. So once we've loaded that data, we're actually ready to go into our next step. And the next step for us is really talking about that model development. How do we convert that logic that is sitting in your standard profitability and put it into Management Ledger? And what we'll see, and what we always say is, you should have some kind of documentation for how your standard profitability model was built. If you don't, it's not too much of a problem. We will need to go through an exercise to get and develop that Excel spreadsheet for that logic. But if you have stage table automation, we can see what was the logic behind that building of the stage table automation and look at putting that into a spreadsheet. So in my specific example, what I'm going to go through and show you is that I've got 4 stages in my standard profitability model, which is my source, my flatten, my allocate, and my expand. And I've documented that. Now, whenever we talk about converting from standard profitability into Management Ledger, what I would always advise and what I always say is start simple. So say you've got 4 stages in standard profitability, see if you can translate that into 4 rule sets in Management Ledger. And rule sets in Management Ledger are really, they're not the same as stages in terms of they don't create duplicate member names or duplicate dimensions, but what they do is host rules with similar logic. So if I have a whole number of rules that are geared towards a specific calculation objective, I'm going to put those all into one rule set. So that makes kind of sense for us to say, great, all the kind of the logic that we had in the flattened stage for our standard profitability, let's put it into a flattened rule set. And it doesn't matter, you can create 1 rule in that rule set, you can create 10, or you can create 50. It really is dependent on what we need to do. We're going to be able to see in our documentation, and we really want to break up and say, great, what are the rule sets that we need to really get where we want to go, and what are the rules that we need to get where we want to go. And for comparison's sake, as I say, we really want to try and keep it in the same kind of way that you did it in standard profitability. So, as I say, what you can see in my standard profitability, I have 4 stages. I have a source, flatten, allocate, and expand. Management Ledger, I have 3 rule sets. And the reason why I've got 3 rule sets is because in Management Ledger, I don't need a source stage. So I've got a flatten stage, an allocate stage, and an expand stage. Well, when we create them, we've defined all our rules and our documentation. The next step for us is really to create our rules and our rule sets. So rules within Management Ledger are POV specific. They are, when we create rules, we can create different rules in one POV to another POV. We can change rules in one POV without affecting another POV. But a big change for us, of course, is that Management Ledger is completely GUI based. There's no staging tables that you need to work with. In Management Ledger, it's all just point and click. And this is fantastic for business users who don't have coding knowledge, because they don't need to worry about any complex back-end automation. You also don't need to worry about any staging tables that you have to maintain as well. It's a big advantage there. And a huge advantage for us if we talk about maintenance in your rule. I spoke about a little bit earlier that your standard profitability works from the bottom up. You have to have an allocation path for every level 0 intersect. Management Ledger, I always like to refer to as working from the top down. And what I mean by that is in my rules, I can select a parent, and everything underneath that parent will be included in my rules. Now that sounds kind of trivial, but it's incredibly important. And the reason why it's so important for us is because if I add a new account, so let's say I've selected income statements in either my source or my destination, I can say any new accounts that come in under the income statement will be part of that allocation, and that is incredibly useful for us. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, because what we really want to say in this is that when you create your rules in Management Ledger, it really is 4 steps. That's it. So easy. Create your rule. Define your rule. What is your name? What does it do? Where does it sit? What is the sequence number? Next, you're going to define your source. So where is that data coming from? And this is where that bottom-down approach comes into play, because I can say, great, take income statement. Anything on an income statement, allocate out. In my profits into dimension, take everything that sits underneath technology and allocate it out. Now, if I add new profits underneath technology, it'll be allocated out on that rule definition, which is fantastic because, as I say, if I add new members all the time, I don't need to update my rules. I can simply just rerun them, which is a huge advantage for us. So once we've defined our source, where is our data coming from, we want to decide where it's going to. So we're going to select our destination. And then finally, we're going to select our driver. So we've selected where our data is coming from, where is it going to, and our driver already just tells us how it's going to get there. So whether we use whatever our driver is that we've decided to use. So very, very easy to create rules. And I really would encourage, if you'd like to know information on this, have a look at that webcast that we did last year, or one of the various other Renzel webcasts that we've done on Management Ledger. Great. So we are ready now to execute. We have done all our rules. We've created our documentation. We've defined our rule sets. We've defined our rules. Let's go ahead and actually kick off this model. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing that we want to do when we think about execution is validate. And we really have 2 types of validation. As I said earlier, we have pre-calculation validation and post-calculation validation. And our pre-calculation validation, when we really talk about the first thing that we want to do is data validation. Is our source data correct? And we can use a whole range of methods for that. We can use Smart View, we can use model queries, we can use our rule balancing reports. So there's a whole number of ways we can do that. But we also want to double check that our model is correct. So Management Ledger allows you to validate your rules and your rule sets before you calculate. And that can be a big time saver for us, because especially when we're going through this development, we won't want to calculate and at the end of the calculation find out that something went wrong. It's not really efficient, it's not the way that we want to go. But once we've validated and we are ready to calculate, we hit the calculation button. And as we mentioned before, as with standard profitability, calculations are POV specific. But Management Ledger does give us some additional calculation options, and there's 3 real ones that I'm going to talk about. is that we can calculate the entire POV. Of course, we can calculate all rules and rule sets at once. But Management Ledger also allows us to select a specific rule set or a range of rule sets to calculate. And we can even calculate a specific rule if we want to. Now, this is a fantastic tool for us, not only for development purposes, where if we see that a specific rule or rule set calculated wrong, we can just recalculate that one rule set or rule and not calculate everything again, but even in a production environment, where if we get in something that we're not expecting or the driver value was incorrect for a specific rule set, we can simply just rerun that rule set after updating our driver, for example. So it really can be a tool that saves us a lot of time in getting where we need to go. And of course, once we finish calculating, we need to run our validations. And again, we have a whole lot of validations that we can run. Some of the more interesting ones for us are execution statistics in Management Ledger. Because like execution statistics tells us, for example, how long every one of the rules took, and it really allows us to find bottlenecks. Great, so moving on. The last thing that we really want to do in this process is say, great, do I balance? When I look at my output from Standard Profitability, what is my output from Management Ledger? And this is a very, very key step because we don't want to create additional data if we don't need to, and we want to make sure that you have the same data coming out of each, of course, unless you've included that additional dimensionality. And you'll see in my example very quickly here, you can see that my total for my head office, my source total, is minus 40 million. You can see that in Management Ledger, for my second stage, my source is also minus 40 million. I then take that minus 4 million and allocate it out to various profit centers. And you can see the totals match up as well. And I can go through the same exercise for the technology and for my back-end other. And I always want to make sure that those totals line up and that they do match. And that's a key step for us. But we can say to you that there is a way, and there is definitely a path to get that standard profitability model into Management Ledger without your data and end result changing. Now, once you've done that, you've done all the hard work. You've really gone along this whole execution path. The last step that you want to do and that you need to do is, of course, migrate to the cloud. And fortunately for us, this is the easiest step of all of it. Once you've got your model into Management Ledger, it's incredibly easy to go up to the cloud. And that really just involves exporting your template. So clicking on the model that you want in Profitability Manager and exporting it. And of course, when we export, we can export a number of POVs, but we really can export the entire POV, but we can also include our input data. So for a starting point in Management Ledger, when we convert Management Ledger to the cloud or migrate it to the cloud, we don't need to import our data again. We can do with our star input data right from the get-go. It takes everything in that Management Ledger application, creates a template out of it, and when we import that into the cloud, we're ready to go. Once we're in the cloud, of course, now we can really take advantage of all those benefits I spoke about earlier. And one of the ones that I really get excited about is the reporting. Because the reporting for us is really allows us to graphically represent all that hard work that we went through, and it really is a way for your end users to consume data in a very easy way, but also in a very relevant way. And PCMCS provides a whole lot of pre-built reports for analytics, and those include things that you can, of course, they can provide you with population performance and analysis, multi-dimensional P&Ls, cost contribution reporting, cost and profitability statistics, and KPI and dashboarding. It's incredibly flexible and it's incredibly easy. And once we've created some of those reports, we can even put them into a dashboard. And these dashboards really allow users to have a very quick snapshot view of what's happening in their specific segment or their specific division at a glance. And they really can identify anything that really is kind of going wrong or even going right. They can pick up trends, and once they pick up a trend through these graphics or through these dashboards, they can then go into the detail and actually dig in and say, great, what is going on here, and look at all that underlying detail that PCMCS will provide you with. So what I've done is really hopefully showing you how easy it is for you to take your standard profitability model and convert it into Management Ledger and go to PCMCS. And that really is your ground to cloud journey. Hopefully you've enjoyed my part of the presentation. I'm going to hand over to you, Bart.
Andrew, thanks for sharing that tremendous know-how and showing us through that great recipe to take models within HPCM and get them into PCMCS. We've got experience with so far over a dozen management ledger type models that cover client profitability, standard rate development for manufacturing, tax transfer pricing, a lot of management ledgers to do expense allocations and client and product profitability, and then also as well anything in the shared service area, specifically around IT. So, I think, again, Andrew, you showed a tremendous recipe here. We have, through all of our experience, we've shown that the effort is reduced by about 40% when you're just creating, and I would say the numbers are similar. And Andrew would echo that, in the maintenance and the validation of profitability models too. So, in a world where we're asked to do more with less, this sort of seems really logical to get to a technology platform and an implementation that allows you to do that, not only from the core modeling, profitability and cost modeling standpoint with Management Ledger, but also wrapping that with all the analytics that is in PCMCS. So what we've developed is really an opportunity here for a low-risk investment. So, as much as Andrew's showing you the recipe, with his master level knowledge, we would like to offer, Andrew, if you go to the next slide, we'd like to offer an accelerator to get you from ground to cloud with PCMCS. Just think of it as bringing your model to us. You're going to a baking class, and Andrew's going to be the master chef, helping you make that that great cake, that rich dark chocolate cake that we all love. But he's going to help you make sure that you treat the ingredients right and get from your data sourcing all the way to this analytical platform with all the calculations in the middle, and included in that offer here for a affordable fixed fee is moving a standard or management ledger model into the cloud for a single POV, working to make sure your data interfaces work great, standing up a report, an analysis view, and one of those intelligent types that Andrew alluded to. And obviously, as we always do, we're really keen on transferring the knowledge back to you. So you can take that recipe now and go back to your home kitchen and make it and maybe expand it, and get to that desired end state that you may want to get to. Now, if you're having some challenges, maybe driving that that want into a need, and you need our know-how, we're including in our accelerator here our one-day free workshop where our crew, like people like Andrew, come out and we're going to assess your current state of allocations, see what you're dealing with, and we help you formulate that road ahead and how to get there. Giving you not only sort of how you might embrace the cloud or embrace this new management ledger style of more efficient modeling, but also maybe look for expansion opportunities, to get even more value out of your current technology, and that's what Renzel's always known for. I know we've run up right against it, Joe, for questions, but if we have questions from the audience, maybe we can take one or two.
Sure, thanks, Bart. First question here, what is the what is the cost benefit of moving to the cloud?
I'll take that. The cost benefit. You know, I think Andrew really hit on a lot of the benefit side. We feel that you know, it is the go-ahead technology for Oracle. The investments are being made there. And, you know, obviously we talked about the 40% reduction in the effort, not only to build, but to maintain, and then the validation. And then you throw on reporting and all the analytical capabilities, and you can show to your end users all the great numbers and all the kind of decisions that can be made off of you know, the alignment of the costs and revenues to either clients or products or channels, or figuring out the, you know, the overhead of your products back to your manufacturing units. Again, whatever business type that you're in whatever industry, there's a tremendous amount of value. On the cost side, hey, we're going to take that cost away from you. Just please look us up afterwards, and we can talk about, you know, how fast we can get you there and at what price. Come to our you know, master chef class to create that nice dark rich chocolate cake with us, known as Management Ledger in the cloud with PCMCS.
Thanks, Bart. During the presentation, you showed how to create the Management Ledger application by using Profitability Manager. How would the process be different if we're using EPMA?
I'll take this one. So we spoke about, obviously, as you mentioned, we did in Profitability Manager, and we are aware that a lot of our clients have legacy standard profitability applications, and specifically clients who've had them for a longer period of time would have built them in EPMA. And EPMA, the process that we went through with Profitability Manager is going to be very similar to if you had them in EPMA. Obviously, you'll just be creating your application in EPMA rather than an S-based master application. And of course, you're going to have to create those new members, those no accounts and no legal entity and etc. in EPMA instead of in Profitability, instead of in your master S-based application. But once you've done that and you've created your applications, you've deployed them, it really is the same from that point on. So you know, your rules are going to be the same. Your rule sets and your defining of your rules is exactly the same. And very importantly, when you're ready to migrate up to the cloud, you can even use Profitability Manager to export EPMA into a template. So even though you're using EPMA, the exporting to a template is the same process. So really how you get it into Management Ledger, whether you're using Profitability Manager or EPMA, we can still get it into the cloud very easily once it's in that Management Ledger kind of way to do it. But obviously we do have a lot of experience on the EPMA side as well. As we said, we've been doing this really from the start of Hyperion, Hyperion Profitability and Cost Management. So we have a lot of experience that if you do have an EPMA model and you would like to speak to us more about how to get that EPMA model into the cloud, then please do reach out to us as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's try to take another question here. What is the most common reaction by end users who have converted a standard profitability application to Management Ledger?
I'll take this one as well. So the biggest reaction that we have a lot of the times to do with the reporting. So we've obviously taken, well, there's two. The biggest one is the reporting, and the second reaction is that they don't need staging tables. So on the reporting side, it's obviously very painful for users, specifically end users, to consume the data, to kind of go through the process of selecting unique names. It's painful, and it can be really confusing to users who are new to the system as well. So that's the biggest advantage that they get, is that they get an application that generally most of the time reports quicker as well, so your feedback is better. But importantly, it's easier for the users to navigate around that application. And the second one for users who use the application is that you don't need staging tables. Because in Management Ledger you have that top-down approach, it's very, very easy to maintain. Now a lot of our users who, a lot of frustration often comes out of the fact that, you know, they'll have staging table automation and the staging table automation may break or may not work that they're expecting it to, and that causes a lot of frustration. And with Management Ledger you just don't need that. You don't need that staging table. So the end users really can appreciate that it's a lot quicker sometimes to get the model, as Bart said, 40%, kind of to get it from start to end, purely because you don't have to manage the staging table elements.
Okay, terrific. One last question before we wrap this up. From what we have been told, Management Ledger is only available from version 11.1.2.4. How can we convert our current standard profitability application to the cloud without upgrading our current on-premise environment?
Yeah, so you definitely are correct that Management Ledger is only available in 11.1.2.4. And Renzal can definitely help you with taking your model from your standard profitability model that may be in 11.1.2.3 or whatever version it may be into the cloud. We obviously have to have the facilities that we need to in order to do that kind of conversion and migration. So Renzal can definitely help you. It's one of the big advantages with us at Renzal is that we have the opportunity to take those things away into a secure environment and to do that kind of work for you as well. So it's definitely something that's possible. It definitely wouldn't be the situation that if you're on 11.1.2.3, I wouldn't consider it a blocker for you to say, oh, but I need to upgrade to 1.4. We just need to make sure that whatever environment we're modeling your management ledger on, that we put your standard profitability on and get a benchmark out of it first as well.
Excellent answer there, Andrew. You know, we have a lot of facilities and environments to help this float to the cloud. Think of it as, you know, a stepping stone, and don't let the versions of the technology hold you back. Joe, one last thing I want to address before we sign off. You know, we've offered the free assessment along with our accelerator here. Quite frankly, to the question back on the cost, costs are always relative to your organization. So if you want to start, you know, conversation around assessing where you are without committing to necessarily, you know, a fix-free offering, those are conversations that we would like to have too. So if you want to engage in that one-day evaluation, any individual who has cost at top of mind, we can run through that process. Again, we're trying to turn you know, something that you might want to do into something that you need to do, and we'll help show you how to do it, not just the technology steps, but, you know, traverse the, you know, the business justification aspect also. With that, Joe, I think we're ready to wrap up.
Yes, sir. Just a note, please visit our website to access recordings of past webinars and also to learn about and register for upcoming webinars. Additional webinars in this series. This is the second webinar in a series of webinars that are addressing PCMCS. And additional webinars in this series will cover such topics as EPRCS enhancements, full service planning, cost management, and profitability in the manufacturing industry, putting the accountability into accountable care, transforming data into information with Oracle PCM, and PCMCS for manufacturers, product standard costs for labor and overhead rates, and connecting the value of IT, the discipline of service costing and chargeback with PCMCS. So please visit our website to learn more about and register for our upcoming webinars. You can also visit Edgewater Renzal's blog to learn more about PCMCS. And I think that's it. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and thanks to both Andrew and Bart for sharing your knowledge and expertise during this presentation. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.